Hello and welcome to the Reinventors podcast from Live to Reinvent. Live to Reinvent provides a comprehensive online longevity, health, fitness and wellbeing training program. And in the Reinventors, we talk to people in midlife and beyond who've made those big changes. We hear about what their trigger point was. What was the thing that made them decide they had to make a change? And then we hear about the steps they took along the way. And finally, they tell us all about where they are now. I can guarantee that after hearing these stories, you'll go away with some practical steps to take for your own reinvention and start to make a change today. Hello and welcome to episode of the Reinventors podcast, and today I'm with the amazing Kath Church, who has had lots of hats over the years, but she's fundamentally a strategist and she's focused on digital and women's health, and she currently works as an advisor and a consultant to startups in women's fintech health, in the health space. She's had a long career where she moved over to the NHS, so she helps people in startups to understand how to work with the NHS, and she's currently in a kind of process of reinvention herself, living the dream in Goa, running retreats, and she's also, like me, we both stopped our alcohol around about the same time, so she's enjoying that as well. So, Kath, is there anything I've missed there about you that you'd like to fill in any gaps there?
No, I think that's brilliant. I'm celebrating 3 months today of being sober, which is amazing. A lot easier than I thought it would be. And maybe the only other thing I would add is that I'm amicably coming out of a 22-year marriage. So there's a whole load of things that I'm finding, rediscovering at the moment, on a professional, on a personal, on all kinds of levels.
Yeah, like many women at this stage in life, there's kind of it'd be very easy to roll up and say, oh, I'm just done with it all. And, kind of menopause has hit. Maybe you've been through it at the other end, maybe you're going through it. And it's a pivotal stage for a lot of women. And I think you're living this pivot in the best way possible. So before we go on to talk about your health tech advice, I'd like to hear more about India, where you are now, and what got you to here to now.
Yeah. So I am, as we speak, in a little village called Mandram, which is in North Goa. It's just about as North Goa as you can get. And I am sitting in a beautiful yoga retreat called Nalanda. And I am opening a plant-based cafe, restaurant and bar, working as part of the leadership team here, helping run the resort. And how this came about is actually one of the reasons that we're connected, Fiona.
Yeah.
So this is through the amazing sisterhood group of women. So just as I was coming out of my marriage last year, Emma Sale reached out. Emma Sale of Killing Kittens reached out and said, I'm doing this trip to Goa. 60 crazy women are going to drive a rickshaw, an old auto rickshaw from Chennai to Panjim. And we are doing it for women and girls education and health charities in India. Do you fancy it? And it was the middle of winter. It was miserable and horrible. And I was, getting divorced, and I was a bit like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. So I was like, yeah, right, I'm doing it. So I signed up. And 60 of us duly crossed the continent. I won't say too much of it because I think you might be doing it next year, Fiona. Mm-hmm. I won't say too much about it. But anyway, so at the end of that, which was an incredible experience as it was, I decided to stay on, travel up to Goa and spend a bit of time here chilling out. And I met the owner of the resort here and his wife and his amazing family. And I was explaining all of this. I'm mid-divorce, kind of like a bit bored of IT. I can do my consultancy work from wherever. And he said, well, why don't you just come and help me run this place? You're my perfect demographic, by which I think he meant white, middle-aged and middle class. And he said, you've got that Western eye. You clearly got the business now, so come and work with me. So that's what I did. So I arrived here on the 20th of October and got stuck in.
And how long are you planning on staying?
Who knows? Who knows? That's the most exciting thing about where I am right now is the season should be till March, end of March, April time. So that's a definite. And then I can't think further than next week at the moment. I may well go and travel around other parts of India. I might come back to the UK. I've got some kind of like boring personal admin to sort out. I want to keep a foot in the UK because of, all my networks in health and government. But after that, who knows? It's the most liberating. It's the most incredible time is just not knowing. And actually, I'm not stressed about it in the slightest.
That's amazing. And I think for anyone, we're about reinvention, and it's not like an overnight thing. Very often it's a process. And I think what you're doing, one of the things that you captured there is being in the moment and just letting, not over planning and overthinking. So you're kind of following your gut, I guess, or your instinct to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm fortunate. I'm in a really fortunate position. I don't have children. I'm friends with my ex-husband who's in our house, so I didn't have to make that decision to pack everything up, which would have been really stressful. He's looking after our lovely cat. I've got a job that I can do from abroad. So I'm in a really, really fortunate position to be able to just up and go and know that I've got something to come back to. But actually, it was a lot easier than I thought it was.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier than yeah, it's amazing. Just the process of packing up was so liberating, really liberating, and being back to where I was in my 20s, where I freaked out when I had more furniture at university that would fit into my car and thought that was the end of my life. I kind of feel all footloose and fancy free again, but knowing that everything that I need is in my computer and in my brain and in my heart, and so it's amazing.
It's funny you say about your 20s, because I think a lot of women in their 50s and men as well, I imagine, get to that point where I think it's quite similar to your 20s, because you have this big gap in the middle where you're busy either careering, raising kids, whatever it might be. It's all full on, and all of a sudden, whether work picks you out, children leave, or whatever, things change. So you've got it back. So I love the fact that you're in Goa, probably with a lot of 20-year-olds around in that area, doing what you're loving doing. And you're able to work on the consultancy work as well whilst you're there. Is that right? And so how do you structure your days there? Just so have you got a desk?
I think one of the things I realize I've done is I brought my British busyness to India, and that is going to have to change. That's going to have to change because I stick out like a bit of a sore thumb. But the UK, so the UK is 5.5 hours behind. So the UK kind of wakes up at 7, round about nowish. So now 7 o'clock onwards, 7 to 10 is like perfect hours for me, because I've done my kind of day's work here, or attempted my day's work. Things work very, very differently, which is an incredible process of kind of discovery of how on earth do you get things done in a culture that's so different. So it all feels very busy. I've got to get some sunbathing in. I've got to get my yoga class in. I've got to get to the gym. I've got the most incredible open air gym in the jungle. I've got to kind of like get on my scooter and go and meet suppliers. So today I've been drinking, I've got here a glass of coconut water kefir, which I'm getting produced, which is incredible. It's so packed with nutrients. It's amazing. So meeting incredible people, and then kind of like doing UK work as well. It feels really nicely busy. It feels as though I've got a real purpose. And I think that's the most important thing for me, is that purpose.
Absolutely. It sounds amazing. And it reminds me, when I went to Kenya in the beginning of the year, I had a similar experience. I was busy all the time. I was like, doing my work, and then I was planning my runs, and then my gym, and then going off to visit schools and all that kind of stuff. You find your life, don't you? You find what drive, and when you've got a purpose, even more so. So going back pre-purpose, maybe, I imagine you've always had a purpose, but somewhere along the way, things lost a little bit, didn't they? So if we go back to before you are where you are now, when were the main points When did you realise change had to happen for you?
Yeah, it was, I mean, we were talking about menopause. That was a huge thing. That was a huge thing for me. So really, I'd always worked in corporate IT. So I'd worked in banks, in big outsourcing organizations. And done some really interesting work. Was senior, got paid money, got paid a lot of money, did some really interesting and big projects. Then it just got a bit repetitive, and I thought, right, okay, the NHS, how hard can it be? And I think that was a real kind of like wake up call for me, because if anybody skis that's listening to this, it's like going down a black run really, really fast and hitting a patch of grass. You carry on going at the same speed, right? Until you hit something really hard. And the thing that you hit is no more wanting to be hit by you than you are the thing. So it was a real culture shock. But I also went in as a chief digital officer just as COVID started. So it was kind of terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. What I didn't realize is that I was also in full perimenopause. So you got this existential angst of the world is going to end. And actually it felt a lot more like the world was going to end, because we were right in the middle of the NHS, and you could really see, the stress and how hard people were working and some of the real risks. And perimenopause just hit me so hard. My anxiety levels went through the roof. I thought I was losing my mind, and I thought it was me. I thought it was kind of like I was the wrong person for the NHS, which in retrospect I probably was. But everything was amplified and made so much worse by this horrendous vortex of anxiety, lack of sleep, self-doubt, brain fog, and I did not diagnose that as perimenopause at all. And so that was horrendous. And the environment in the NHS, for anybody who's gone from the private into the public sector, it's a real culture shock. So trying to do that when you are hormonally disabled was horrendous. Yeah. I then had a hysterectomy. I burnt out. So I had about 4 years of pretty heavy shit, really, but pretty unpleasant things happening, and it seemed to be one on the back of another, and that took its toll on my marriage. For both of us, I don't think I was the easiest person to be around. I certainly didn't like being around myself at that time. And we'd been together for an awful long time, and we just drifted apart. And then as I came out of that, it was like coming out of a fog, getting proper HRT, recovering from the hysterectomy, really getting myself established as a consultant. And I just kind of looked around. It felt as though I was popping through the surface of the water and just went, this isn't where I want to be. This is not where I want to be. And then, as I said before, the sisterhood, the Goa trip, and here I am.
Yeah. So, I mean, yours is a real clear reinvention in the sense that you kind of reinvented yourself by going to the NHS. I mean, that sounds like, describe that black slope. Menopause in itself means that women go through yet another change and often have to find a new way to adapt to the shift that happens when we're in menopause. Did you, when was this? 2020, around about lockdown time, you said? So how long did it last, the menopause period? The perimenopause symptoms.
Yeah, I think it was a good couple of years, and I had the same story as so many women, which is this was one of the triggers for really getting into women's health. I've always been into, women in technology. I've always been a massive supporter of women in tech through my career. But then focusing on the femtech bit was I went to my GP. I was diagnosed with depression. I knew I wasn't depressed. Yeah. And I was put on sertraline, which just made me suicidal. And they literally made me suicidal. Then when I did manage to convince my GP to prescribe HRT for me, I took that for a while. I was feeling loads better, went to the pharmacy to fill my prescription again. And he was like, why are you taking this? This is like the most old fashioned, the synthetic estrogen from horses' urine, from mare's urine. It was so old because my GP was so old. He got a MIMS, their prescribing guide out, that was literally older than me. So it was a real trial and error. There were no menopause services in my area, so I had to go private. I had the most incredible private specialist. and then managed to get myself on body identical hormones, and then, you know, got the mix right of estrogen, progesterone, and until I had the hysterectomy, and then testosterone. So it was it was probably a 4-year period of 2 years thinking I was going completely nuts. 1 year of like real horrendous depression, and now coming out the other side and just being like, well, this is what it feels like to, you know, to feel healthy, to feel normal.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it, that women go through that and it's prescribed the wrong things, told they've got depression, you know. And you said you were literally suicidal. I mean, how close were you to being suicidal?
Oh, I mean, I never thought, I never kind of understood it. I never understood how anybody could take their own life. But I do now. There's a kind of beckoning. There's a horrendous kind of plummeting depth that for that moment in time just makes you feel as though you would do anything rather than wake up again. And that is really frightening. That is incredibly frightening. And I never want to feel like that again.
No, I know. And as you said, it's great that you're working in women's health, because a lot of women still do feel like that. And sadly, a lot of women do take their own lives in perimenopause. It's such a tumultuous time, not only for the hormonal physical changes that we all go through, but life also can be throwing things at you left, right and centre, you know. Yeah, marriage was the ending, and work, and
So work is one thing, end of marriages, but I think one of the most pernicious things that I see, and I'm really starting to see in friends around me, is women who still have children at home and are starting to look after their parents and their spouse's parents. So we do 2.5 times the amount of unpaid labour and unpaid care. 60% of 60 to 70% of all caring hours are delivered by women, when we are at a time where we're probably hormonally on our knees, emotionally on our knees, you know, suffering some of the most pernicious forms of ageism in the workplace, and trying to do all that with you know, another set of people to care for. It feels really cruel. That, hey, you can always just leave it all behind and come to Goa.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, so you got through a pretty tough time. You would have had to take steps along the way. So you went to the right doctor, you did your research. Were there any other sort of like steps that you took, like, you know, fitness wise or health wise, that to help you make the changes that you've made and wait to get to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. That's a really good question. I've always been into the gym and fitness, but actually the more I researched around menopause and hormonal changes and the impacts on our bodies, the more it's got me determined and into that. And there were other things that I mean, funnily enough, I could never do front crawl. I could never swim front crawl. And it's just like, right, I'm going to learn. So I learned how to do front crawl, for example, which felt like something, it felt really bold to go and learn to, you know, admitting that at age 50, I think I was 51 a couple of years ago, that was it. Yeah, admitting that I couldn't do something that most people learn when they're, you know, when they're at primary school. That's also really liberating. That kind of, I don't know if I can swear, but they've, you know, like, fuck it, I didn't learn to do it then, I'm going to learn to do it now because I really want to do it. So there's a real sense of kind of like letting go of a whole ton of expectations, and actually becoming closer to my body than I'd ever been, and like seeing it, you know, recognizing the power that it has and the power that I have, and looking after each other a lot more as happened through menopause.
Well, I guess the stopping drinking is part of that as well. So how did you come to that decision? And is it something you're going to carry? You know, have you made that change? I think.
Yeah. So coming to that decision, I think especially being over here in India, where people really don't drink a lot, has just helped me see how ingrained alcohol is in our UK culture. And it's basically because I had those 4 years that were really not very particularly happy. You know, the stress with work and the thinking that you're going mental with perimenopause. Then it's so easy to just go, right, okay, I'll have a glass of wine when I get home from work. And even as I'm saying it, it doesn't sound that like, oh, I'll have a glass of wine. But like the glasses that we have in the UK now are like a third of a bottle. So by the time my husband got back from work, because I was doing a lot of work from home, I probably had half a bottle. So by the time he'd had a glass, then you end up opening another bottle, and it ends up that you've drunk a bottle of wine in the evening, every evening. And that's before you go and see friends and you can do the 8-10 units of alcohol.
Yeah.
And we just ends up constantly being in either a fog of hangover, a kind of like grayness, which when you add that grayness to the grayness and anxiety of perimenopause, I just look back and I just think, how did I do it? How did I do it? And and I just insidiously crept up on me, and a couple of incidents where I, like blacked out, couldn't remember what had happened, what I'd said, and I just thought, this is it. I can't go to India as a woman on my own.
Yeah,
a woman of my age on my own, and feel as though I've got this kind of demon in me. I never knew whether I was going to have 2 glasses of wine and be absolutely fine, or whether I just ended up being on the 3rd bottle and then not remembering how I got home. So it was only a very short period of time, but it was really impactful to just go, no, that's it. I can't live like this.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. I speak from a very direct experience because there's triggers everywhere. It's part of our culture. You're right, in India, easy. I did it in Kenya as well, and it was easy. But now Christmas, it's like, oh my God, it's just everyone's talking, go for a drink. And it is quite hard then to reinvent yourself as a non-drinker, actually, in sort of, the London life and Brighton life and what have you. But I can see from you and hear from you that it's doing you a lot of good, and it has for me. So have you noticed your clarity of thinking and, any other benefits?
Absolutely. So much so I cannot envisage a hangover. The last time I drank, a hangover was so vicious. It was a 2-day hangover, and I've got like an alcohol day. I'm sober, which gives you kind of like daily motivations and things, and you put your reasons in for not drinking. And I actually took a photo of something I wrote when I was really drunk, and I look at it and I just think, who is that person? Yeah. So yes, I cannot think of having a hangover like I used to have before. Just the thought of it, it just doesn't compute. It's like, why would I do that? Honestly, why would I do that? But being around people that don't drink is a lot easier. Although I did manage to do all of the kind of like leaving dues and a massive party at my house without alcohol. And I didn't miss it that much. So, but it is, I'm sure it's a lot easier over here.
And were you, I mean, because, that is, and again, I keep using reinvent because this is a reinvented thing. But, were you someone who drank like from your teenager? It's just how you socialise. Yeah, just like me. And it's very common. But and I do think when you're going through a process of big change, if you can help yourself along the way with doing the physical fitness, getting strong, the gym, particularly for women, not just because there are loads of reasons why we should be strong, for lean muscle mass, for being osteoporosis, but for your mental health as well, to be strong is good. So coming on to what you're doing now, I'd just like to hear a little bit about some of the people you consult with, because I know you work with some helping women's health brands. What sort of green shoots are there? Green shoots for women's health tech? Because I know it's always behind the men's funding and everything.
There is so much reason for hope. I mean, female-founded companies still only get 2% of global funding. That's still a horrendous stat. But so many VCs now have woken up to menopause as an opportunity to exploit women. This is a very personal view, but I think menopause now, there is menopause everything from shampoo to chocolate to hair care brands to all kinds of things. So menowashing is real. But what that has done, though, I think is is created an investable category in women's health, where you've got that kind of that consumer brand piece with the women's health kind of like interest. So that Venn diagram there makes lots of B2C things a lot more fundable.
Yeah,
I don't think it's ethically necessarily what we need as women, but it has created a huge amount of interest in femtech and women's health as a subsection of investment. And so that means there's more money going into research, and there's also a lot more awareness across all of the sections of the innovation consortiums and continuum. So I think there's huge amounts of hope. There's huge amounts of really exciting innovations in wearables, for example, in continuous hormone monitoring. So actually enabling us to understand what's happening with our hormones. Intra-day, intra-week, intra-month, across the years, to try and look at patterns as to what's happening in our bodies. There's so much happening in early detection of a whole range of different cancers, again through wearables, which is really exciting. There's a whole load of tracking apps that are giving women really important information and insight back into their own health. At the moment, I'm really focused on urinary tract infections, which is, if we think of women's health as Cinderella, if we think of menopause as being the Cinderella of Cinderella, and then you put older women and urine together, and then you're talking about completely uninvestable areas. But 50% of women will suffer from a UTI in their lives. 30% of those, it will be a common occurrence, and it gets more and more prevalent as you get into menopause. And again, there's some really exciting research that's going on in there, especially around hormones and use of vaginal estrogen as a really important addition to HRT to start to renew the vagina and the estrogen in the vagina, plumping up some of those tissues there, which makes us less likely to get UTIs. There's some really interesting stuff happening in precision diagnostics. So being able to understand what type of infection we have and prescribe the right antibiotics and do that really quickly. So there's a ton of stuff in there, and there's some really interesting stuff around probiotics and prophylactics. So loads of work going on into the vaginal microbiome. I think that's the next big area that we'll all be focusing on. We've got our guts sorted. We're going to start thinking about our vaginal microbiome.
Makes sense. And also, I mean, we work in longevity, in the longevity space, and I think post-menopause, we all still need to be looked after, or it's one word, not the right word, but we want to optimize our health. And so from what you're talking about, naturally goes towards the longevity place. Well, so I mean, UTIs as people get older can be really problematic. For those women you talked about looking after parents, once they get a UTI, it's an absolute bloody nightmare.
Oh, it's I think it's 1.2 million hospital nights, hospital stays. It's a third of all cases of sepsis will start with an undiagnosed and not well treated UTI. It's a massive driver of antimicrobial resistance. And it's huge. And the great thing is that the women's health strategy in the UK is being renewed, and UTIs were not mentioned last time, but there's a real growing movement of women who are really calling for, and I'm one of them, and working with some amazing women in the space, who are calling for a lot more action, a lot more targeted and direct action, looking into that early diagnosis, precision diagnosis, and early treatment and intervention of UTIs. Because once you tend to get one, they can come back, and as they come back, you become more and more resistant to the standard antibiotics. So I'm convening a cross-industry roundtable around this, bringing pharma together, retail pharmacy, primary, secondary care, the national NHSE team, and a ton of innovators to see if we can find 2 or 3 areas where we can change the pathway using the tools that we already have. This isn't about launching brand new clinical trials. There's some work going on in that. There's lots more that needs to happen. But actually, this is more about how we recognize women and where we signpost them, so that we can get so that we can get treated with the right kind of treatment much more quickly. So watch this space. I'm hoping the women's health strategy will have UTIs and genitourinary medicine right at the center.
Women's health strategies, it really has been, up until recent times, appalling, really. We've just been neglected in so many areas. So it's great that you're involved and working on the, which, as you said, is a neglected area. And I've said it goes into the longevity place as well. And I think that the precision, there's an interesting thing with the precision diagnostics that links to, living a long and healthy life and understanding where you are now and how you can prevent all sorts of things. But taking out all the wearables, the precision diagnostics and all of that stuff, where you are now in India doing your yoga, and I'm really interested in longevity as a kind of has two pieces. There's the biohacking, there's the science, and there's a lot of brilliant stuff. But there's also the simplicity of life. Like you talked about your Western busyness and everything. Could you see any lessons from where you are now, from the yoga and from the pace of life, for that longevity, for putting life into your years, not years into your life? Just really something we can learn from where you are now.
Yeah. Again, that's a really interesting question. It's funny because Goa is a bit like Brighton, so it would be like coming to Brighton and thinking that you could get some kind of lessons from what it's like to be British. Goa is very much in kind of like little bubble here, and it doesn't really feel like India because there's people from absolutely all over the world that are coming here and have created this melting pot of some of it is very woo-woo and some of it is like really interesting practice. But I suppose, and most of the people here are either small farmers, they're much wealthier than in other parts of India. Goans tend to be much wealthier than in other parts of India and very involved in tourism. So I'm not sure that I'm in any way qualified to talk about India. But what I can say from doing yoga on a daily basis is just how much bendier I am. So for anyone who goes to the gym a lot, and I cycle a lot as well, my hamstrings are the size of a toddler's. Really short and tight muscles from working out, and linking that in with yoga, I found that my hip mobility, my hip flexibility, my knee flexibility, my ankle flexibility, my shoulder flexibility is so much better, so much better. And of course, when you're doing yoga, the way that it's practiced over here, which isn't power yoga, it's not power flows and power vinyasas, and the way the way we tend to do it in the UK, which is much more like an aerobics class. This is much more grounded, and it's slower, and I think that gives you more time for meditating and kind of finding a bit of inner peace. And then also you're doing it overlooking a jungle or overlooking the sea, and you hear the monkeys in the trees. So that kind of makes it slightly different from coming out and kind of like jumping on a bus or the underground to go home.
Yeah, amazing. And do you, like you say, it's quite woo and stuff. I'm just wondering if you've anything shifted in you as well from being there, from doing it. Well, obviously physically your hips and everything are better, but anything else you've noticed?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm only in month 2. There's things will happen. That's where I'm getting to. I think we put so much effort into controlling and managing and directing, but actually here it might not look as though there's a plan at first, but the most extraordinary things happen. And so they happen. So it's sometimes for me, it's just about stepping back and just going, no, hang on a second. I've got no idea how things happen here, rather than trying to my kind of type of structure of let's have a deadline, let's have a meeting, let's do it this way, let's have written specs, let's do all of this. Just sit back and observe, because this place, everything works. It might not work in exactly the same way as it does back in the West, but it works, and people are happy and people get fed, and so I think there's a lot. This certainly for me had a hell of a lot to observe and to learn.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing, and I think you're right. The thing about control, nobody really can control anything. And we tend to think we can control, everything, weight, hours we work, money, but all those things. But I think you step away from this crazy life and you get to see things through a different lens and realize, oh, actually, we're not really in control of anything. So you may as well go, I mean, you're keeping busy, you're doing business, you're doing everything potentially that you'll be doing here from what you're saying, but in a slightly different way. And you're not, you're not doing yoga every day, it's a real kind of living a reinvented. You've reinvented probably with hardly even noticing how much you've reinvented.
Totally. And I think the biggest reinvention actually is that kind of expectation of the future, and that's the most liberating thing, is that I have literally no idea what I'm going to be doing this time next year. And that is so freeing. It is so incredibly liberating to be able to see that without feeling scared.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think that's what drives a lot of people to feeling depressed or anxious. Anxiety is worrying about the future, isn't it? So if you can let that go, that's a massive, massive step. So you're doing the trip, the sisterhood trip in March. I don't think I am, unfortunately, this time, but I'm definitely, okay. It doesn't quite fit for me this time, but that's an amazing thing. And as you say, it's the power of a group of women supporting each other, supporting people locally with local female charities, schools, etc. Isn't it? That's what the drive behind it is. And I think your purpose is coming through very clearly, and it's really interesting to see how just little shifts can make someone, just make because people are often searching for purpose, but you have it just by doing, I think.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is that if I were to look back and say, I didn't realize how quickly these things had happened, the change of job, the feeling very out of place, the perimenopause, hysterectomy, burnout, end of marriage, all of those things. And at some point, I think it was when I was in Goa here in March, I just went, I've had enough of being miserable. I've had enough. This stops. It ends now. I'm not going to be miserable anymore. And that was with the help of antidepressants, and they saved my life. I genuinely think so. And I've come off those now as well. Yeah. So I'm completely chemical free apart from HRT. But I think it was the realization that actually we do have a choice, and I did have a choice as to whether I was happy or unhappy, and all of these things, that had happened, and they're all quite big things.
Yeah, in a way. It's horrible, isn't it? It's grim. It's grim.
Yeah, but so was the alternative. So, I think that was the moment. I think I'd been waiting for that point where I hit rock bottom, like on, almost like in the sea, where I could hit rock bottom and then I could push myself back up. And that moment happened to be when I was here in Goa with the sisterhood, where I just went, like, that's it. I've had enough. I'm not going to be miserable anymore. And that was the kind of pivot point.
And I mean, I hope anyone who's listening can hear that loud and clear, that, because when you're in that place, it's really hard to see a way out. But at some level, there is making a choice and saying, I'm not going to be miserable, I'm going to be happy. And it might not happen instantly, I guess, but you just start to you move in you go in a different direction, don't you? And I think it's it's very inspiring. And you kind of made me really want to pack my bags again and take off, because why not? We don't have forever, so it's an important thing to do. Be where you want to be, and be happy.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's letting go of the future. It's like it will look after itself.
Well, I think that's a lovely way to end. I think if you do have information about your yoga retreats and the clients you're working with, we can share when we're posting. But I'll finish it there and just say thank you so much, Kath. I've really enjoyed our conversation about reinvention, and what I'm massively inspired, and I'm sure lots of other people will be too.
Amazing. Thanks for having me on, Fiona.